Malcolm Hoenlein is with us. We call this the Weekly Update, Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. And we got the news this week of the engagement of Mindy and Akiva. The Stein and Goldschmidt families are celebrating, which means, of course, that the grandparents, the Hoenleins, are celebrating as well. Malcolm, I say Mazal Tov, and welcome back to JM in the AM.
Well, yeah, thank you very much. And we need many more simachot, and we should only have simachot. So the Goldschmidt and the Lerman families, we found many common connections. I even knew his great-grandfather,
wow,
who used to listen to us in JM and the AM,
woo,
and other members of the family were regulars. And we really, thank God, very happy. And this was a week full of engagements because of Rosh Chodesh coming. Last night we had 3, and it's Ken Yerbo. This we really need some achot and wonderful new families growing up. And
well, you don't mean 3 in your family. You mean yesterday you were invited to 3 events.
3 different, engagements. 3, it's hard enough with 1 at a time.
Yeah, boy.
And rushed because of Rosh Chodesh. And also I want to extend condolences to Nachum Segal, to the Reeder family on the passing of Mrs. Leah Reeder. Amazing people, amazing family, and she was very much so. And so we have still tzaros in to go, but we also need the simachot.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I was up there yesterday paying a Shiva call, and she specifically, Leah, who passed away, was somebody who had a very long time relationship with my wife from many, many years ago, and it was unfortunately under those circumstances, but it was nice to reconnect yesterday during that opportunity. Also, because we're on the subject of people passing, and unfortunately, as I've been mentioning throughout the morning, we know too many people who, during this transitional season, have left us. And I wanted to just mention Congressman Elliot Engel. I thought it was worthwhile and certainly appropriate to just remember him for a moment, because I think you'd agree that he was there. He was there for the community. He was there for our people in general for many, many years in service in Washington, D.C.
100% right. And I'm glad you mentioned it, reminded us, because his passing went relatively quietly in terms of public notice. But he was chairman of foreign relations. He was very active in South America. He was a stand-up Jew. He was somebody who stood up for American principles. He didn't compromise on them. He represented his district for many decades, and he died at the age of 79. But the last few years, he was relatively out of the limelight. But we should certainly, we owe him a lot of hakarat hatov for his years of service. And remember that he lost to a very bad guy.
Yep, he was a victim of that whole sweep.
Exactly, and I
want to tell you something.
We don't have many like him today. And
honestly, it's actually good that we've gone in this direction, especially as we haven't spoken in a couple of weeks. People may not be aware of some of the stuff going on in Washington. 40 senators voted to block U.S. arms sales to Israel, and I'm talking about Democratic senators. 40 senators on the Democratic side of the aisle voted to block U.S. arms sales to Israel. Quite the opposite of what you just described regarding Congressman Engel, may he rest in peace. Malcolm, everyone needs to be aware and certainly wake up to the fact that the support in Washington, as much as we do emphasize the positive here when it comes to support in Washington, this is a startling development. Agreed?
Well, it's been cumulative. Obviously, it's terrible, and it's a blow, and it's maybe wake up people. I just spoke earlier this week to people here and other communities and saying, do voter registration now. Don't wait until September and October. Start now, and especially with the kids graduating high schools and others that we should register as many people here and around the country. It's really vital. You see that the turnout on an election like yesterday in New Jersey, where a very bad person got elected, a Democrat, inconsistent with the Bernie Sanders wing and the AOC wing of the Democratic Party, as people say it should be called a socialist party. The fact that 40 in a time when Israel has been fighting against terrorism, against on four fronts, and taking together, standing with the United States against Iran in the most remarkable way, and that they could even say that they would vote to cut the arms sales. And this is a tendency in Europe. There were votes also. Thank God, in most cases, it wasn't successful, or it has minimal impact. But when countries like Spain engage in the kind of blatant, ongoing, hostile, viciously hostile policies towards Israel, and people go there to vacation, I just don't understand it. You got to start using our leverage, whatever it is. And you might say, well, it doesn't matter what one person does. Yes, but it does matter when a lot of one persons do it. And a lot of people care about America, not just about Israel. I mean, we're seeing something we've talked about for decades, that people now come up to me at a simcha last night, many, and said, I remember when you warned about Iran 30 years ago. We all thought it was crazy. Nobody even thought about Iran as an issue, let alone some of the other matters about Islamist fundamentalism. And the problem is that we can't close our eyes to these things, because we see now how bad the impact is on anti-Semitism, on the threats to Israel, the global shifting to adopt policies where Jewish life is threatened in some countries, that we act now proactively. It's time when everybody has to register. Everybody has to look at the candidates that are running, get involved in the campaigns, get people to run for campaigns, train young people, invest in it so that they will do it, that committed young Jews will run for office. The Muslims have a deliberate campaign with foreign funding and domestic funding. I spoke about this more than 10 years ago, because we had seen some of the plans in Michigan and other places where they elect them to committees and to city council, and then they get elected to Congress, and they're implementing it. Yeah. And we're sitting on our hands.
Yeah, and we know that New York has to wake up, obvious reasons. We see who's leading New York City at the moment. And New Jersey has to wake up. Cory Booker's on that list that I mentioned of those who voted against it. And we see who just won the special election to replace the governor's seat in Congress. So, you'd think what you're describing is only states that, have minimal association with Jewish communities and Zionist-leaning communities. We're talking about New York and New Jersey.
But many of those states, as the work of the Council of Secure America, for instance, in Montana, Idaho, North Dakota, South Dakota, places, nobody goes there and talks about it. They're very pro-Israel.
Right.
But nobody has invested in them, and they have, and they get a great response from the governors, senators, et cetera.
But if they weren't, voter registration drives there would be irrelevant. In New York and New Jersey, voter registration drives can be very effective.
Exactly.
Yeah. And people need to remember that, and I hope they heed your advice. All right, to the news of the last couple of weeks, and obviously the headline is whether we are still at war with Iran or not. Can you tell us from your perspective the state of this ceasefire? If you think it will last? The president of the United States is now alluding to the fact that it'll be a permanent ceasefire. What do you think?
So, first of all, with Iran, there's nothing permanent. Their word is not their word. It doesn't matter. It depends on who's going to be in charge. And we have a whole series of overlaying challenges that we have to address, because it's not a simple yes or no when, members of the IRGC the delegation were from the IRGC who refused to accept the conditions that were put forward by the United States, and have become more and more minimal, though still significant. And you have to remember the categories. It's whether it's removing all the enriched uranium and the production capacity in terms of a nuclear program. And the president said they can never have a nuclear weapon. They can't have the enrichment, et cetera. Do they have continue to support their allies like the Houthis, who are still threatening now again, and the Hezbollah, Hamas, et cetera? And, of course, the ballistic missile program, which Israel puts greater leverage on because it's a more direct threat immediately to them, but ultimately it will be to Europe, to the United States, to everyone. And in terms of regime change, a term people don't use, and we don't make it as a frontline goal, But obviously, that is the most important thing. Until this regime changes, until you get out these people, because they have one layer after another that were removed. And if you look at the record, it's amazing. Yet they fill the gap. It doesn't mean that they're qualified people. It doesn't mean that they are people who enjoy broad support. Some people get painted as moderates, like the Speaker of the Parliament and others who are far from being moderates. But in revolutions, it's not during the fighting when the change takes place. It's afterwards. It's right. Once things stop, then people can focus on the internal situation. The problem you have is that you have hundreds of thousands of armed Basiji who are vicious and who go into the streets and just shot people as they did in January. So people, I think, are intimidated somewhat. But during the fighting, we know that people can't focus on that, and they're not going to nobody has emerged as a leader of the opposition that galvanizes the people. And I've worked with people inside Iran. I spoke to them yesterday, some who are courageous, but they're also nationalistic. People, Iranians, even some Jews, that keep this ties to Iran that are very strong. So, number one, we're still in a stage of flux, and we have to see what will happen if they deliver, they don't deliver. We have built up our presence there. The president on the straits, and you remember how everybody said that this would explode the world, just as they said that every move that they made would bring a world war or a regional war. Quite the opposite has happened. So all of the pundits were wrong and predictions and assessments. It's when you're tough with tough people, when terrorists stand against consistent policies that put the markers down, and the president's show of force in the region is really vital. There will be so many changes after this war is over in terms of the Gulf countries' relationships with one another, because countries like UAE that did stand with the United States and Israel stood with them, they will be in a very different position when this war is over. And the internecine warfares that were seen even before, like UAE versus Saudi Arabia, and many others, these things are all going to have to be sorted out. So we may have a very different region, and the dynamic in the region may be different. But it's critical that the threat of Iran be removed, that we focus again on Turkey, which is expanding its footprint in Africa and in the region, especially in Syria, and the work of Shara, who under the cover of this war has reinstituted some of the old Islamist policies, even if not legislating them, but implementing them. So I think the consistency of the United States in saying this is our policy, these are the bottom lines. We're not going to waver on it. We're not going to say, okay, we'll compromise and you can have 40%, 20% enrichment. That is a mistake.
Right.
It has to be zero.
But if there's no real regime change, is that a prerequisite for an actual real ceasefire? Because the reality is that most people listening right now just don't know if it's even possible that there'll be true regime change. And if that is a prerequisite, a precondition for an actual peace deal to put an end to this war, we may never see an end.
Absolutely. It can't be a precondition. It has to be, as I said, something that gets carried out afterwards. But we have to create the conditions within the agreement that will put the government on notice. The economic conditions there are horrendous. The cost is about $500 billion just in the destruction, but they have to rebuild so much, and the economic conditions were terrible before.
Oh, you had mentioned, someone asked me this. You had mentioned that there was a real water shortage in Iran. Is that still the case? Is that still the case? And how do they manage it? What is there, rationing? Like, how does it work?
I don't know how they eat, frankly. And Iran was largely self-sufficient. Remember, it's a huge country, 100 million people. It's the size of, I think, England, France, and Italy put together. And the oil and energy is, I think, like 20% or 25% of the income. So their exports in many other areas. It's a very the people are hardworking, and the bazaars, and they are used to trading and to engaging in these activities, business activities. But the water shortage is very real. The water system, which happened to have been built by Israeli engineers during the days of the Shah, he brought them in because Israel already then had taken steps to make the desert bloom and all that. And they built the reservoir system. And some of the newspapers blamed them for the water shortage for kicking out the Israelis and saying, you destroyed us when you kicked them out, because they're the ones who built it and could have maintained it. So 7 of the 10 reservoirs serving Tehran are not functional. How they function today with their currency being almost worthless, and I'm sure it's heavily subsidized by the government to get basic foods, because that there's nothing that will drive people into the streets more than hunger. But they can't sustain it over the long term.
And the average family has no access to water? I mean, you speak to these people.
No, there was talk, if you remember, to remove the people from Tehran and to move them out because they couldn't supply the water. But right now, nobody's focused on that. Everybody's focused on other things. But if you notice that Israel and the United States in the bombings tried not to hit the infrastructure, they didn't hit the electricity system, so people continued to get electricity, because you don't want to turn the people against you. So when things that affect them in their lives, most of the strikes were surgical, and they hit military targets. And it is quite remarkable when you have 18,000 or so bombings and incidents, and the death toll was considerably, surprisingly light, and the vast majority were terrorists and IRGC and Army, etc. So the people have moved out, and now some are moving back to cities like Tehran. But you're right, the long-term problem of the water remains. And, by the way, in terms of other areas as well of the production, how soon that will all be able to get back online. I don't see the Chinese stepping in, as some say, and pouring billions of dollars into it. They will only use it to increase their leverage in the country. And the Russians, I don't think, have the money to spare.
It's funny. It's really the only worthwhile Chinese investment if politically it helps them. Otherwise, they're not interested, obviously.
And whatever protects their oil supply, of which
right, again,
30% comes from Iran.
Right, that's the financial part of it. Right. If it makes sense for them financially, then they'd get involved. Otherwise, why would they? Right. Makes sense. America's one and only Jewish Moments in the Morning radio program, heard on listeners-sponsored digital radio. Around the world, the web at NachumSegal.com, on the Nachum Segal Network, and, of course, in the beloved NSN app. Malcolm Hoenlein with us. Weekly update time. And now we move to the other ceasefire. This one came a little bit out of left field. All of a sudden, the Lebanese government is interested in sitting down with the Israelis. There may actually be a meeting in Washington. We heard what the ambassadors had to say. Netanyahu is respecting Trump's request for a 10-day ceasefire, even without taking it to a vote, etc., etc. You can't, as a Lebanese government, sit down with Israel without some type of endorsement by Hezbollah. Am I right or wrong?
They will never get an endorsement by Hezbollah. The question is,
then why now? Then why did we get to this point now?
First of all, it isn't. It may appear that, but that's not the reality. This is something that's been cumulative. Israel, if you remember, signed an agreement over the water, the energy in the water-based energy that when Bennett was prime minister, which is not that long ago, and there have been consistent periods, a pattern of periods where the relationship between Lebanon and Israel were very good during the Gemayel days, the good fence, if you remember. Yeah. There were agreements reached between Lebanon and Israel because there are no territorial issues involved. Israel is in the area that they've occupied up to the Litani, have a presence in, it makes me crazy when people use the term occupied, because Israel is doing this as a defensive measure, because you got to remove them from firing at least tank distance from the communities in the north. People in the north are still unable to go home assured that, Lebanese are not, the Hezbollah is not going to fire from them. They were firing hundreds of missiles a day. It didn't get the coverage. Even in the last hour before the ceasefire went, they fired 40 missiles at Israel, and they fire to the central areas as well as, and then there's no warning when it comes from Lebanon. You don't have it like when it's coming from Iran. So the Lebanese people, by and large, don't want Hezbollah. They want to get rid of him. They're oppressed by them. They say that they suck them into these wars. They don't want the wars. Every poll shows overwhelmingly people don't. Are they unhappy with the bombings and stuff? Yes. But even courageously in interviews with places like BBC and unfriendly places, they stand up for it and they say we want good relations with Israel. And and some of them remember the days when they had good relations. So this is a cumulative thing. There've been off and on periods. We've had wars, and some were very heavy. And Israel, the army stayed for a long time in Lebanon in order to stabilize the situation, because this cancerous element, this Hezbollah, backed by Iran with unlimited amounts of money. I mean, just the amount of weapons that they find everywhere, the tunnel systems that they found, huge tunnels, and packed with weapons, and the whole system of operation that used to come through Syria. I think now that they don't allow, by and large, the weapons to go through Syria to get to Hezbollah. So the Lebanese people are different than in some of the other countries in terms of they're wanting to have peace and to live in peace with Israel. I think for the majority or many of them, the Christian community has been diminished there, and there's this artificial construct in the Constitution that the president is a Christian and then the prime minister is a Muslim, and they maintain that fiction, but the actual population proportions and ratios are not the same as they were then. So the fact that you could reach a ceasefire with Lebanon is not surprising. The question is whether it can hold, and whether the Lebanese army will at any point really take control, because until they do, Israel can't leave a vacuum, because Hezbollah will fill it immediately. Now, the Lebanese army is not strong, and they need a lot of help, and that's where the Europeans should be stepping in and saying, we will help build them up, we will supply weapons, we will supply troops, to supervise the any agreements. But as a rule, Hezbollah is going to lie. They're going to use it to try and rebuild. So you have to take out the roots of this from the deep underground, and make sure that they can't just resurrect it 3 months, 5 months, 6 months later.
Yeah, well, that's why I started with you need some type of Hezbollah endorsement of these talks, because otherwise they're just going to, try to completely sabotage everything. Do you think there really will be a White House Lebanon-Israel meeting?
I think it's very possible. I think certainly Aoun will want it. Remember, this projects them. I think certainly Prime Minister Netanyahu welcomes the opportunity to come and to make his case to the American people and to the Prime Minister. And it's certainly, if the President invites, it's very hard to turn it down. And the relationship between the United States and Israel has been truly remarkable. It's probably the most remarkable demonstration of coordination between two governments that we've seen in decades, maybe ever. And all the CENTCOM people, all the others, they praise the relationship with Israel and the way that things were carried out jointly. As you know, we read about the cost of the United States. We don't read about the immense cost this is to Israel, buying these weapons, taking the resupplies as they have just in recent days to position themselves again. They run low on the missile defense system, and the worldwide supply of a lot of these weapons has shrunk because of the war in Ukraine and because of this war. And production. We have, I think, one or two places that make ammunition in the United States, in the whole United States. So they are talking about making the car industries retool and use it to produce weapons and other things for the United States, not just for Israel, but also for our allies. I think a meeting is likely, and I think that the more they talk, the better it will be. But nobody should expect instant solutions. It's complicated issues. And as you said, the pressure of Hezbollah, they can disrupt life in Lebanon very quickly.
President of Lebanon is going to have a target on his back, but I guess you'd say he always does, right?
Oh, exactly.
Yeah. I don't know. It's and then you look at Gaza, where some people had some hope that President Trump's plan would at least create some type of normalcy there. Israel still has its extended border, right? It's basically extended its border and has a military presence that is not going to quickly leave at the moment. And Hamas has basically said they're not giving up their weapons, which, as we know, is a precondition for moving forward with any type of normalcy and peace agreement there. So Same, is very, very similar type of political battle being fought on that front as well.
Yes, and it's even in some sense more complicated, but it is remarkable how quiet it has been.
Yeah.
And you see having the buffer in Israel, cleaning up that area along its border has enabled life to start to resume and to rebuild. But again, we have our troops, the Israeli troops are extended for a long period of time. American troops have also been, I think the USS Ford, the aircraft carrier, was already 289 days at sea, which is a record for them. So, troops are tired, and Israeli troops are tired. Some have been called back 6-7 times. Talking about the Miluim, let alone the standing army. And we haven't cured the problem in Gaza. We've stalemated it for a while. But you saw that there were attempts again, and periodically Israel has to act against terror things. But the peace board that the president put together has put forward a plan, and again, Hamas rejected disarmament plans and rejected some of the other suggestions that were made, because their interest can only sustain their control if, in fact, they have their armaments and if they have the ability to control the people. Yeah. And they are doing more, by the way, on the other half of Gaza, not the part that Israel occupies, right, to reassert their control.
So one of the safer places in Israel now, the Gaza border.
It is
ironic, huh?
True.
Ironic.
It's very ironic. Exactly.
Don't you think it was a bad idea for the president to pick a fight with the Pope about Iran?
Yes, but I think, nobody's above criticism on both sides of that. But I think you have to be careful how you do it and people's sensitivities, and especially with an election coming up. And I don't think the popes enjoyed the support that they once did. And it's, we've seen the church having problems in Europe, where many churches have become mosques and where attendance is very limited. But still, he is the spiritual leader for hundreds of millions of people, billions of people, 1.5 billion, I think, Catholics in the world. So to have this kind of deflection now,
and frankly, it's not like he's being inconsistent. Popes are basically, at least publicly, anti-war, right? That's basically the line they always take.
Yeah, well, the question for us is how their attitudes towards Israel. There have been meetings, of course, with this Pope, as there have been with others on a regular basis. Some of them were more friendly and more open. We'll have to see. This is still early in his term, but I think to have the attention diverted by this is not helpful. We need to keep people focused on who the real enemy is and what the real challenge is.
Good point. What do you think of the Orban loss to Magyar in Hungary? And can there be a Magyar-Netanyahu relationship that's normal?
We'll have to see. I think Magyar is taking it very slowly in terms of the policies. He didn't, the weapons and the other relationships with Israel continue. And Israel has done a lot for Hungary. And the visits by the vice president and even some Israelis to Hungary before the election, a lot of people question it, but the relationship between Orban and Netanyahu and Orban standing, within the European Union, it's been the East European countries like Hungary that have stood with Israel. And Magyar did say that he would continue that, or at least put it under review, but he's not saying I'm going to end that. But there are other policies that he's now, I think we can expect not to have the same kind of relationship between Israel and Hungary as there was before. We'll have to see whether he's willing to really stand up in Europe. There won't be the same relationship with Putin, obviously, but losing these voices, if Poland, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, they have been standing up for Israel against old Europe in the EU and vetoing resolutions and policies that would have been very harmful. I hope that can be sustained.
Interesting. Excuse me. What do you think when the shekel went to 3 shekel per dollar this week?
it actually dipped below 3. This is the lowest in 30 years, that I think. And every one of us who have trying to have an investment in Israel, a place in Israel, and haven't paid already, are going to pay essentially 20-25% more than what you would have paid a year ago,
right,
when the shekel hit, even hit 4. But it's a remarkable statement about the economy of Israel. You think of Israel that just fought in a war in January. They've been fighting consistently. They have expended huge amounts of money on the defense of the country. And yet people's confidence in the economy, when against the dollar, it sinks to record lows. And the implications are very consistent. Look, all of the Americans who go there and are paid in dollars. So instead of getting $3 they're going to get, 3 shekels, 4 shekels, they're going to get 3 shekels. It's going to impact their ability, and it impacts, of course, import exports, some favorably, mostly unfavorably, I think. And but the ability of people to purchase homes, and I know there's a lot of pent up interest, and places are selling like crazy in Israel. But this will have an impact on it.
So anybody in the tourism and who depends on the tourism industry in Israel can't be thrilled with this news.
It's absolutely right. We don't even think about it, about how much they have suffered over the last year. Tourism was down so much. They try to make it up with domestic tourism. It doesn't really work the same. And people who come, let's say, to the hotels, they come for the weekends, and they give them special deals to keep the places going and to keep the staff on. It's very hard to keep a staff when you don't have people for months' time, and when you didn't have air flights for people to come. Now El Al is going back to full schedule. People are flying. They're telling me there aren't long lines, so people should consider booking again.
But all the other airlines basically canceled the summer.
Some they may come back if things are really quiet. Remember, this is a very profitable route. I was trying to think of what the right word for them is. I'm not going to say it's loyal, but it's a profitable route. A place like Turkey, I have to tell you that I know Turkish Air would love to come back. They were doing 13 flights, 14 a week. Now Azeri Airlines have picked up that slack for people going to the Far East, or others going with Azeri Airlines. And Azerbaijan has been a great ally with Israel. Their planes are very nice.
So they must really believe this war is not going to restart.
Right now people are being very cautious. I think American postponed until September. Others have postponed over the summer, which is unfair, because if things come back, there's no reason why June, July, August they shouldn't be able to fly more. Some of the European airlines will probably fly again because it's a very profitable route for them.
Right.
And
people just want to know.
And El Al will fill in. And Arkia started to fill in some of the
people
flights.
just want to know if it's over. Those outside of Israel want to know if they could travel freely, as you just described. Those in Israel want to know if they could stop running to shelters and anticipate a normal end to the school year. I think people just want to know already what the story is. And again, based on what you just described, I'm getting the feeling that a lot of sectors are sort of leaning on the fact that this is heading toward being over, even though the President of the United States keeps threatening, hey, we're days away, we're ready to really go in and start this all over again if Iran doesn't agree to what they need to agree to. So I don't know. Maybe it's 50-50, but I'm just getting an impression that most people are depending on the fact that the U.S. is going to make sure this is ending.
Well, also they see that Hezbollah has been diminished. Hamas has been diminished. And what I've said on the show for 20 years, that if Iran goes, then all of these will not be the same. The whole Middle East can change, and countries will assert themselves if you don't have the threat of, and the weapons coming from Iran supporting the threat of these terrorist extensions of Iran. So that will change a lot in the Middle East. We have to see, and as I said, we still have continuing threats from a lot of these groups, and from Islam, from Qatar and Turkey and the Muslim Brotherhood.
Right.
And we see weakness in places like Egypt and elsewhere, where policies are of great concern, and the direction of Saudi Arabia is not clear, and the internal dissensions and disruptions, but maybe there'll be beneficial things like Pakistan becoming more open. No instant conversion, but possibilities abound.
Before we wish Israel a happy 78th birthday, I was asked to bring up, we've seen plenty of progressive groups, over the years take on the quote-unquote Palestinian cause. Unfortunately, many of them rooted in the Jewish community. Everyone's familiar with that, and you certainly are. But someone pointed out to me that this new Jewish narrative has gone even further than those traditional progressive groups. I was wondering if you were observing them at all and if you agree with that.
Of course, we observe the groups, and it's especially painful when the comments come from those who profess to be Jewish or under the cover. In some cases, they aren't. In some cases, they actually are, including some members of Congress whose parents were Jewish, I guess, who even supported the Sanders amendment, which tells you what direction the Democratic Party is. We should not give up on the Democratic Party. We can't afford to lose the Democrats. We have to play more of a role and expose the rot inside, and the fact that they seem to become more like the Democratic Socialists than the Democrats of old. I'm sure Scoop Jackson and Fritz Mondale know these guys who are rolling their graves, seeing what's happened to the party, and the good guys in the Democratic Party today are more and more isolated. We should be supporting them as well. But the overall trend is of what's happening in America. The campuses are more quiet, and everybody should read Lee Stefanik's new book about the poison ivies of what's going on the campus and the articles that are coming out. It's not gone. It's just they're more careful because the government and the Trump administration, Department of Justice and others are going after these colleges, which does make a difference. And many of them settle right away because they don't want the lawsuits, and they're much more careful. But it's continuing, and we still get the harassment. We still get the incidents on the campuses. The professors in universities here in New York who are viciously hostile continue to teach and continue to promulgate their lies and distortions on the campuses. The only thing is we haven't seen the manifestations because I think the policies and the fact that administrations are being held to account really does make a difference.
Wow. Happy 78th birthday to the State of Israel.
Yes, absolutely. And we should not take it for granted. That's a message we repeated on the show since day one. And that is, Israel, Baruch Hashem, is strong, and Israel can do what they did these last few weeks. But don't take it for granted. The cost is immense. The investment is immense. And the long-term consequences, the rebuilding that Israel has to, everybody talks about the damage done to other countries. Israel sustained a lot of damage. And also the PTSD, the psychological and other needs of thousands, even tens of thousands of people in Israel. There'll be immense burdens on the government that will head into an election within the next 6 months. So it's going to be a period of tumult and perhaps uncertainty. But we have to remain steadfast and continue the activities. People should buy now while it's still, if they can still get a place. But the most important, plan to visit Israel. We got to show the people of Israel that we're there and that we're standing with them. And they don't ask us to pick up the rifles, but they do at least ask us to take a hotel room and enjoy Israel.
Yeah, that's the least we could do. So, Malcolm, I thank you. Have a wonderful Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh, and we'll speak again, please, next week.
God willing, be well. Good Shabbos.
Malcolm Hoenlein, weekly update, everybody, on a Friday morning here at JM and AM. If you missed any of it, don't forget that in addition to our archives, a weekly update is available on our YouTube page, Nachum Segal Net. May not be up on the YouTube page before Shabbos, although this time of year I think it will be. Have to check that with Avrami. But in addition to our regular archives, you can always access it through YouTube as well, which is a big advantage for a lot of people. Much easier for some people to do that, believe it or not.